You're listening to Nutrition Matters Podcast with Paige Smathers, registered dietitian nutritionist.
Hi everyone, it's Paige Smathers. Thanks so much for being here. Nutrition Matters Podcast explores what really matters in nutrition and health with a sensitive and realistic approach. To help support the podcast, please consider making a donation at positive-nutrition.com/podcast. If you find this episode interesting, engaging, or helpful in your life, please consider donating, sharing with friends and family, and leaving a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever podcast app you use to listen to this podcast. You can leave a review about this podcast straight from your podcast app. Search Nutrition Matters Podcast, click reviews, and then write a review. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook if you'd like to have a little more food for thought. Thank you for listening.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Nutrition Matters Podcast. My name is Paige, and I'm your host. And I'm really stoked to share this conversation with you, as always. But yeah, this one in particular, I think is really important. So many of you who have been longtime listeners will know that I typically record episodes with sort of the non-clinician in mind. So my podcast is really geared toward the person who's trying to really figure out what matters to them with nutrition and health, and trying to kind of work on their own relationship with food. So that's sort of usually who the podcast reaches and who I record episodes for. So this particular conversation that I'm sharing this week is one that's maybe geared more toward the dietitian listeners that I have. And so even if you aren't a dietitian, I think you'll still find this interesting, hopefully, and relevant for all of us to be thinking about these things. So this week I'm talking with Tamara Melton and Deanna Bellany, and we're talking about their new project, Diversify Dietetics. So we're going to dive in, and they're going to explain more about the mission of Diversify Dietetics and what it's for. But it's this really great new nonprofit that is providing mentorship opportunities, spotlights of different dietitians, and opportunities for education and training for folks in leadership roles, in internships, and in other areas for dietitians to help maximize access to jobs and to success, and also to internships and training for registered dietitians and students of color. So I'm super excited about this because this is just such an important thing, to be able to have representation, people who look like you, who are in roles professionally that you hope to be someday. It's really just nice to see someone who looks like you, nice to see someone doing the work you hope to be doing. That just helps it not feel so out of reach. So today on the podcast, we're talking about their new program, and we're highlighting what they're up to and really digging into some of their own experiences that have sparked this idea for both of them. So super excited about that. I also, just a follow-up from a couple weeks ago when I made some announcements about my a dietitian's role in addiction recovery webinar that I put on. I got that approved for continuing education as a pre-recorded webinar. So if you're interested in listening to that, it's $10. You can find it on my website, positive-nutrition.com /SUDS. So substance use disorders is what that stands for. So head on over to positive-nutrition.com /SUDs. And there you'll find the webinar and also the ebook with the same title, Dietitian's Role in Substance Use Disorders. There's an ebook that you can access that will give you a really good kind of foundation to understanding more about substance use disorders and the dietitian's role in that setting. So if you're interested in learning more about that and getting some continuing education, you can either do the webinar for continuing education or just read the ebook, which doesn't provide continuing education credits, but really informative as well. So check those out. And also, both of those are sort of an introductory thing to this 10-week curriculum that I've created. So it's called Positive Nutrition for Substance Use Disorders. And this is for registered dietitians to implement in the treatment setting. It's 10 lessons ready to go. It's a whole curriculum that's evidence-based, that has references and citations at the end of every lesson. It is something that has been years in the making for me, something that I use in my treatment centers, and I've just gotten such a great response about. When you buy the curriculum, you also get access to a services pitch that you can use to pitch the service of nutrition groups for clinical directors and other people in charge in the treatment setting. So this is you can learn more about it through the webinar if you choose to go that route. And if you're interested in checking out the curriculum, just go to positive-nutrition.com/curriculum. And yeah, you can learn more about it there. Or if you ever have any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out. So that'll be especially relevant to my dietitian listeners. It's really rewarding stuff. I just recommend getting some training and supervision around how to approach it in a responsible way and in a helpful way. So that's what I'm aiming to do with those 3 things. So there's the webinar for continuing education, there's the ebook, and then there's the curriculum. If you buy the curriculum, it includes the ebook as well. So yeah, just wanted to make that announcement and help everybody know about one of the things that I've been up to over the last few months is getting that all together, and I'm really happy with how it's turned out. So reach out with any questions. And just a quick shout out, thanks to those of you who have left reviews, those of you who make donations to the podcast. All of that is just so appreciated. Those of you who share the podcast on social media or with your friends and family, all of that means a lot too. So thank you for helping me kind of have a better reach when it comes to, all your efforts to help share the podcast. It's really appreciated. So, yeah, back to the podcast episode for the day. I would love to introduce Tamara and Deanna to you. They are 2 registered dietitians, and Deanna lives in Houston, Texas. She's in the public health space, and she'll do more explaining about what she does. And then Tamara Melton is in Atlanta, Georgia, and she's spent time in the education space as a professor in college, and then she's also specializes in health informatics, which she describes as like IT. Let's see, how does she say? Health IT. And they're both really passionate about this idea of mentorship and providing access and resources to dietitians and dietitians to be of color, which I just totally stand behind and support. And I think it's such an important project. And I am so excited to highlight their work today on the podcast. So thanks for being here, and let's get into the episode. Tamara and Deanna, welcome to Nutrition Matters Podcast.
Hey, glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to talk about your project and what you both do professionally and the field of dietetics. So before we get into everything, I just want to let the listeners know that this conversation I'm anticipating is going to be probably a bit more relevant for my dietitian listeners. And for any of you who have listened for a while now, you'll know that I usually make podcasts kind of geared towards the layperson or the person who doesn't do this for work. So this is going to be a unique one where we're talking more to the dietitian listeners and or any other kind of allied health professionals, or really anyone in the field of health in general. I think this topic will be really relevant. So I'm excited to dive into it with you both today. So before we get into it, will each of you just introduce yourselves briefly and just talk about what you do for work, and then we'll get into your project that you are both doing together.
Sure, yeah.
Tamara, you can go first.
Okay. Yeah, so I work in actually health informatics, and so the way that I got this to where I am now, I was working in higher ed at a university here. I live in Atlanta, and I was in a position where I was teaching for the nutrition department about 50% of the time. And then I was helping with admissions and recruitment for all of our health professions within the college. And part of that 50% also included helping to start new programs. And one of the new programs that we started was a health informatics program while I was there. And I had not realized I had worked in health informatics because a bit of a data nerd. I really like data. And I would try to use data in different ways to tell stories. And that is definitely a component of informatics. So very long story short, I became the program director of the health informatics program at Georgia State University and did that for 4 years. But then I wanted to go out and actually practice in informatics because I had not actually really practiced in it as an informaticist. And I had completed a postgraduate certificate at Duke in their nursing school in informatics. And you do a practicum to kind of get some practical experience. And I really loved that. And so I had the opportunity to take a position. I actually wrote my job description for the position that I have now, where I am the National Director for Health Informatics for Morrison Healthcare. So I basically work with all of our accounts. So we are the largest healthcare food service company in the United States, and I work with all of our accounts. Our end users, as we call them, they are dietitians or chefs, our frontline associates, the folks who deliver the foods to the patients, who might be serving the foods in our cafes, and any kind of a project that we have that uses software, technology, or on the backside, any technology that we have that uses data. Those are the types of projects that I work on. So it's a lot, it's a mouthful. It's definitely a lot of people like, nope, I don't want to hear it. It sounds very data-like, but I love it because with this position, I work with dietitians and I work with IT. And for me, that's like the perfect job.
The best of both worlds that you love.
Best of both worlds. Yep.
Awesome. How about you, Deanna?
Yeah, and for me, I'm kind of on the community side of things. I started out after my internship working for a nonprofit that kind of had a charter school as well as some Head Starts. And so I was managing their nutrition program, which was kind of a nice blend of food service and community. And then I decided to go back to school and get my master's in public health because I really liked the whole program planning side, learning how to build and evaluate effective programs that were meant for the community. So I did that and finished at UT School of Public Health here in Houston, and then started with the county's public health department, Harris County Public Health. That's what I currently do now. It's really, really exciting. I really love working in the community. So
awesome.
So I do.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That's really good to hear the background of what both of you do outside of this project. So really quickly, it sounds like you, Tamara, were sort of the one that maybe came up with the idea and then brought Deanna on board. Is that fair to say?
So,
or kind of give us the background of what you're up to?
I think what was happening was Deanna and I were having the same idea hundreds of miles apart and didn't realize it.
Oh, that's the best.
And through the magic of social media, we came together. So I had actually thought of this concept because one of the benefits that I had as being the chair of the informatics program at the university was that I was the person who got to lead our admissions process. And so I was the person who was able to, if you will, take a chance on students. So if we, you have you can measure students by GPA and, their volunteer hours and decide who to choose into the program. But I had some leverage in that leadership role to decide to take students who might have a little bit less of a GPA and then kind of really give them an opportunity to come into what was a challenging technology-based program that also had clinical with it. And so as I looked at the field of nutrition, I thought, through the course of several different conversations that I had with people, that if we could somewhat change and shift so that students who are of color have the ability to either have more access to resources so that they can get over any barriers that they might have, be it related to their race or ethnicity or just related to anything that might be common to any student, and be able to get them into the programs and kind of nurture them through, then I think that we could see a shift in the diversity within our profession. And I mentioned this to my husband, and he works in the business community. He said, well, sounds like you want to do something like what they have for this organization that's called MLT. It's Management Leadership for Tomorrow. And I looked it up MLT on the web and saw that they have career prep for underrepresented minority students, and they're really successful, and these students go into these leadership roles. So I was saying all this, and I was cryptically putting like all these things out on my social media. So people were like, what are you doing? I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing yet, but I know I'm going to do something. And I mentioned it to Jess and Wendy of Food Heaven Made Easy. And I said it to them at FNCE last year, our nutrition conference that we have every year. And I just kind of said to them through social media, like, I'm working on something. I want to have this nonprofit that will help to increase diversity. And Deanna actually reached out to them because she had the same idea. And they said, you need to connect with Tamara.
Oh, yeah,
they
so
connected
awesome.
us.
So they said, you need to connect with Tamara. And I had already, I've really been putting things into place and had a different name, but Deanna reached out to me, thankfully. And we chatted. I tried to talk to her as soon as possible. We chatted. And I was telling her my idea, she's just like, yep. And I said, I mentioned MLT. And she's like, oh yeah, my fiance was going through MLT. And that's when I said, oh, we need to work together, because most people have never heard of that organization. So yeah, I think, Deanna, you could speak to that. I think we were concurrent. There were so many ideas that we had that were aligned. We just hadn't met yet.
Oh, that's so amazing. Yeah, Deanna, talk about your process.
I mean, exactly how I felt as well. So I had kind of, had a couple experiences where I felt like my race played a role in something that someone had said or something that someone had did, especially, at FNC and around different dietitians. And so I had a dialogue with my director from my dietetic internship, who works at a HBCU, and I had just kind of picked her brain about, how does this work in the selection process? Like, what is the issue? Like, why haven't we come further? Especially for an organization that's been around for a while, why are the stats so low? And so
do you know what the stats are, really quick? Like, do you have
from 2017? What is it, 9%, Tamara, that are considered non-white?
Yes. So that is the number
of dietetics in the field of dietetics.
Yeah, that's the last number I had seen, where 9% identify as non-white. So that is a really massive, discrepancy. Especially if you look at the demographic of the U.S. and how it's changing. Yeah. And so, so I had kind of known that I wanted to do something. I knew I wanted a mentorship aspect to be a part of it. I knew I wanted to focus on, skill building, but also, target the educator so that, we could kind of reduce this barrier or this mindset of whatever it is that, there's not a larger amount of RDs of color being admitted into dietetic internships. So I kind of poked around and made a site that looks nowhere near as gorgeous as the one we have now.
It looks so good. It really does.
Yeah. And then like Tamara had said, kind of seeing a post on IG that from Wendy and Jess. And I had been talking to my fiance who was going through the MLT program and was just like, gosh, I really want something like this to happen. And I wanted to make this change. And he was like, oh, that sounds exactly like MLT, just for your profession instead of for the business.
Okay, so you both were having the same idea not really across the country, but very far apart from each other. And then you came together and formed this, is it a nonprofit?
It is.
Okay.
It will be official soon.
Okay, so talk about the nonprofit, what it's called, and what its mission is. And then I'd really like to kind of, if you're comfortable, get into sort of the nitty gritty of what you've experienced and what you've found out as you've talked to more people about this, as you talk to internship directors and or people in leadership roles. What are the barriers? What is the lived experience like? Just to open anyone's mind who maybe hasn't thought about this before.
Mm-hmm. So I can speak to our mission. So our organization's name is Diversifying Dietetics, and that's us on Facebook and on Instagram. We're Diversify RDN on Twitter. But our mission is to increase diversity in the field of nutrition by really empowering students and young professionals from underrepresented minority groups so that they can join into our profession. And I know that and Deanna could definitely speak to some of her experiences. My experiences have been more kind of, not so much that I really experienced anything as far as what I would consider microaggressions or racism while I was in school. I did not. And I was in a very, in an urban campus once I was in graduate school because I was in Atlanta. And so it's Atlanta, which is very welcoming, I think, for Black professionals, as is Houston, where Deanna is at. But I think that what I have noticed a lot of was when I was practicing as a dietitian, and I would go into different communities, and it would be African American mainly around this area in Georgia, and they were just really happy to see me. They were just like, "Oh, look at you! We never see a dietitian." I was working for an organization that employed a lot of dietitians, so a lot of dietitians had come. It was a senior center, and so that just kind of struck me. And then as a professor, my students would say to me, just seeing somebody who looks like you makes me know that I can do it. just having that representation was very important to them. And then I think that over the last couple of weeks since we've launched Diversify Dietetics, and we have heard from students who are in nutrition programs, there's been a variety of comments related to that they did not feel, they just haven't seen a lot of people of color, and they're living in large urban centers, so they're in very diverse areas, or there's a sense of not feeling as welcome in their programs, or maybe somebody's making a comment that might be a little bit insensitive because of where they are coming from and their culture. And so I think that that's been something that has kind of reinforced to let us know that our idea that we had is something that is needed, that the students do feel like they would need some empowering, they really want to have a community, and that there's some work to be done with our educators and dietetic internship directors who are working with students.
And is that part of the mission, is to work with those folks in charge, kind of, to change the landscape?
Exactly. That is definitely one of our areas. And I did not have that initially. The great thing about me meeting Deanna was, Deanna, you could definitely speak to your experience about what happened to you, but she was the one who was mentioning things that happened to her. And that's when I said, oh yeah, I love that, because that is something, focusing on the people who get to decide the pipeline, which is what's going to affect the profession, is something that we should also focus on.
Definitely. So Deanna, do you want to share your side of the story?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I mean, I live in Houston, and Houston is a very diverse place. So I don't think I necessarily recognized it in school. But when I got into my dietetic internship, there was just a lot of talk about, the stereotype of what an RD is. And so, you have that like type A, probably white, blonde or brunette who, I don't know, whatever the stereotype is, because that kind of what I had heard. And so my program itself was probably about 50% RDs of color and 50% white RDs. So I didn't see it there, but I do remember after I had finished, I got to go to Fancy in Boston. And I was standing in line, at Fancy, everybody gets a bunch of free stuff. So I'm in line for something free. And I'm with another RD, a black RD. And we're just kind of waiting in line to get us some yogurt. And the lady turns around and just is like appalled. Like she looks shocked. She's like, oh, there's just not that many of you here. And so me and her like look back and forth at each other, and we're like, oh yeah, okay, not really knowing how to react to that. But it was kind of the first time that someone had called it out.
Not very many of you face. Here. Wow.
As in, yeah, exactly. not even appropriately. It was just very offsetting, I would say.
Yeah.
And so, I went about my day, and there was a poster session at that same conference, and it was a white professor who had done some research on different barriers that RDs of colors face, and going through or getting into programs and going through programs in general. And a lady I was standing next to, kind of, you read the board and you kind of look at the research, and she was like, well, I'm a director, and I had an African-American in my class last year, and, she didn't pass her RD exam, so I just don't know. And so, I know. It's so appalling. Like,
that is
and so
appalling.
And my jaw just on the floor. Like,
mine is right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and I'm standing right next to her. Like it's not, we're not far apart. She's not whispering. So I'm just staring at her and looking at her, and I'm like, okay, more than RDs of color are ones failing exams. Have you thought about that? She's like, oh, are you an RD? And I was like, yes, I am. That's why I'm here. She's like, oh, okay. And then just slowly walked away. But it was just like, wow. Really realizing that maybe this isn't a problem that everyone sees. And if not, like, why not? And what can be done to fix it? So that same conference, I went and met up, like I said, with my dietetic internship director, and was just kind of like, what do y'all think about when you are admitting people into your program? Like, does race play a role? Do you think about how diverse your group's going to be? And she was like, well, I know I do, but I also know that there are other internships that purposefully, select the people that fit whatever stereotype or whatever demographic they want to fit. So that is when I kind of knew, like, okay, well, something needs to be done so that this can change. Like, whether it's, preparing students to make sure that, their package is seamless, you have to work harder, or if it's preparing directors and breaking down whatever barriers and stereotypes and, preconceived notions that they have on their point of view. So yeah. I think that's when we knew it was important to bring in the students, important to have a mentoring aspect so people have, relationships and they can talk to and learn from, but also to address, the issues that are happening with the people that are admitting students into their dietetic internship program. So that was my experience.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
I know that this doesn't relate on any significant level, but just from my perspective, I feel a little alienated from my own profession sometimes, just because I don't identify as like a really type A person. And so when you were talking about that stereotype, I'm like, yeah, that's just so not me. Like, and I've had feelings where it's like, wow, if that's how I have to be in order to be a dietitian, maybe I haven't picked the right profession. I can only imagine what it must feel like, just with so many other layers of race and culture, and not feeling like you even have someone to look at who is like in that mentorship role, or like, do people from my background even go into this field? Like, I can only imagine, because I already feel a little bit, alienated sometimes just with my temperament.
Yeah, and so we recently did an RDN spotlight on an RD whose name is Kendra. And she brought it up, how this impacts our patients, because, she was teaching, I think it was a group of African-American youth. And, the reason they didn't want to eat healthy is because it was a white people thing. It was perceived as something that not someone from their culture does. So, I mean, this has implications, from students all the way to the patients that we're trying to impact. And so I think that's also a message that we're trying to make sure is relayed, is that this isn't just for, the individual or, the classroom. It's for everything. It's for health in general.
That is such a good point. I can see that being such a barrier. Like, well, that's white people stuff, and so I don't want to even have, especially coming from a small blonde white type A woman, right? Like, that's just going to be super tough to even hear. I can only imagine. Okay, thank you for sharing all of that. That's super, super interesting. So it sounds like there's a lot of layers of what you both are putting together here. Do you want to just kind of give maybe a zoomed out broad picture of what you're doing, and then let's talk about the different components and why each of them matters. And I think what's really interesting to me in particular is just hearing those little anecdotes, like you just mentioned, it's perceived as a white person thing to care about nutrition. And so more people of color who are dietitians are going to be able to relay messages in a way that's just so valuable for lots of different, people from different backgrounds. So that type of stuff is really fascinating to me, to just kind of weave that into what you're doing as you're explaining what you're doing. Talk about that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, some of the programming, Dean and I just actually met recently to really think through what our goals are and our vision. One thing we did do, we're working on, like she said, we're going through the process of officially becoming a 501c3. And so we will be selecting our board of directors soon. But we did make sure that we reached out and got an advisory council of very diverse group of professionals, nutrition professionals, as to give us some feedback from their different perspective and from their experiences, going through different programs. So we have that group with us, because we're not here. It's not the Deanna and Tamara show. We're in the silo. We're not trying to get feedback. So we've got plenty of surveys out on our website and trying to get feedback from people. So what we've gotten from that, going back, because we're using this as our reference organization for MLT, is to create some programming. And then one of the programs is to give students resources. There are some organizations out there, I know, even companies, that offer quote unquote resources for students to be able to successfully get into through undergrad and internships, but you have to pay for it. And we know that's a barrier to students of color, is to pay for things that they're already trying to pay to go through school. And so we have that as one of those resources. Deanna kind of mentioned that we want to make sure that the students are prepared. When we talk to educators, and I know from somebody working in admissions, there are laws that say you can't look at a student's race to choose them for a program. And so we're aware of that.
Yeah, that was that question when you were both talking about meeting with people and that they were sort of admitting to that. I was like, isn't that illegal?
Yes, there's further laws that say that. So that's something we need to be aware of, because not only is that, yes, they shouldn't be doing that in the fashion that Deanna mentioned, but they also can't do it on the flip side, where they go and say, we're only going to accept all the students of color because we're looking at their ethnicity. That is not legal. But what you can do is affect the amount of students who are eligible to be accepted into your program. That is a way to affect a program's demographics. It's something that we did at the university that I worked at. We just made sure that we had the student. We are going out and making sure that all students are equally prepared. And that equality versus equity is very important, because there's some students who just because of there's a lot of different things in the United States and the structure that's going to affect the students as from a 5-year-old on to an 18-year-old, how prepared they're going to be for college. And then can they pay for college? If they're not able to pay for a semester of books, how will they continue on, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of these barriers will affect students of color. So some of our programs are going to be looking at things like that. And then also we talked about our mentoring program that will help them with, having someone who, they can identify with, who can help them through that process and choosing, an internship. And I know for me, a lot of people, when I went to undergrad, didn't even know that was something they had to do. So they didn't know to save up money for it.
Right.
And so that's things that they need to know about too. How do I do that? How do I get ready for this whole match process? And now we're going to have this new master's degree requirement. So how do I do? So that's what our program is going to be around, to give them the education, if you will, or resources to let them be successful. Because yes, when you have an aunt or a friend or someone who, who has done this before, done college, who can take you through and help you to be successful, that's really great. But a lot of students of color don't have that. And so we want to provide that to them. So that's one of the things that we are working on, is just really strong programming that the students can have access to these resources that can really help them with really specific targeted resolutions to any sort of a challenge that we have seen coming up. And we've gotten a lot of the ideas from students, because we have a survey out there, and we've said, and
that's
educators,
always the best way to do it.
Yeah. So that's definitely one of the things that we're doing.
And then all, like, kind of underlying all of that, we still have kind of the social aspect of it. So a big thing for us was to making sure that we are building this community, or having a platform where this community can kind of blossom. So of course we're on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and where people can effectively have conversations about, whatever they're going through, whether it's, I'm writing my letter of intent, or I don't know who to get a recommendation letter from. There's a community there that you can bounce ideas off of, even if you're not participating in maybe one of our formal programs that we're going to have, or more formal programs. There's still that there. And I think we've definitely seen where people are excited about it. They're excited that the pages are there, and that, they're able to connect with people that are in their state or at their school or, nearby, that are diverse just like they are.
And another feature that we have on our website I'm really excited about is the RDN Spotlight series that Deanna mentioned earlier. And so we just kind of put a call out and said, if you're an RD of color working in any area, you don't have to be somebody who's like in media or something like that, just any area, please reach out to us and answer some questions so that we can do a series. And the goal there is to have a group of dietitians for representation. And we've had people who are Southeast Asian, African American, African, who are from the Caribbean, they're from Mexican. I mean, they're all over the place who've already reached out to us. And so I'm just really excited to, as we're putting those up on the blog, of all these different RDs who are going to be on there, so that if a student is Mexican, or a student is from Pakistan or something like that, they will look and say, oh, there's somebody who looks like me. It might just be one person, but we're putting them out there and documenting it and their stories so that people can see them. And I think even more broadly to the clients and the patients that we serve, maybe they see it too, and they say, okay, they do have somebody who understands about, whatever my customs might be, or what's really important to me and my culture. Okay, this is a legit profession, because they are really getting to know what we're all about.
Right. So I can see that there's implications for the students and the professionals, the dietitian, and that whole community, how important that is to have that support and that representation and the mentorship and all of that. And then beyond, why did we all become dietitians? I would assume it's because we really want to help people, and we want to, do good in this world. And that is so necessary for the people that we work with to feel like they're understood, and to feel like there's a connection, and some shared experience. And obviously you can do that across cultures and across races, but how awesome for, a client from Mexico to have a Mexican dietitian who can connect on that level, and how great to have someone who knows halal in and out, because that, that's their practice at home, versus, some white girl from Utah being like, let's talk about halal. You know what I mean? So that's really great.
Mm-hmm.
It ends up in better client and patient care, which I think is what we all want.
Exactly. And we just put a blog up today, kind of focusing on that, because we know, we want to make sure that we're rooted in evidence as well, because we are dietitians and we value that. So there's a blog that's just talking about why this matters, what the evidence is kind of saying about it, from the patient perspective, as well as from the student educator's perspective of why diversity is so important. So
tell me more about that. Like, what did you talk about in the blog post, and what are some interesting things from there?
The title is The Academy, Diversity, and the search for a brighter future, something along those lines. But so from the educator perspective, or from a student perspective, it just is research that shows that these students get a better quality education if they're in a diverse setting. It improves their skills. You'll get to have a better racial cultural understanding. You get more active thinking, intellectual engagement, maybe some cultural sensitivity, hopefully. So it's beneficial for the student. And then for our patients, it helps to address some racial and ethnic healthcare disparities. It gives them more options. It's shown that they have better satisfaction or are more engaged, might share more information. So just leads in better outcomes health-wise, or in better satisfaction, like I said, if they're working with someone that they can identify with. And there was also some research that pointed that minority practitioners are more likely to work in those minority neighborhoods and in lower income communities as well. So it helps to address, disparities that are there.
And yeah, that's so important. I'm interested in your lived experience, both of you, if you don't mind sharing, just like, what is it like for you when you have a client or a patient who is white? Do you get treated differently? Do you notice that there's a difference? I mean, I notice as a female, that there are, like, sometimes when I'm teaching a class and there's men in there, and this isn't across the board and always true, but I noticed that there is this element of like, oh, well, I need to show you how much I know, because I can't have a woman teaching me. And so that's my lived experience. But I'm wondering, from your perspectives and what you've experienced, have you had some of that kind of professional, I don't know what the right word is for that, but.
Yeah. I have to say that I haven't, when I did any one-on-one counseling, and I've seen hundreds of clients and patients over the years, if they were a white patient or client, I never had an idea of them even really questioning what I did or know or anything like that. I have had some, not really question, I think just more surprise, because I work from home, and if I walk into the room with maybe at a client site or something with my current position, because I work in health IT, they're like, oh, we didn't expect to see a Black woman working in health IT. Like, that's just not who we at all expected. So every now and then I get that. What I got was kind of what I spoke to before, is that when I'm working with people of color, they're so excited to see me. Mm-hmm. It's a thought of, oh man, girl, you made it? Yes. And there's just this shared, like, yes, we're so happy to see you. And then they'll say things like, oh, you know what I mean when I'm talking about eating this, or you know what I mean when I'm saying such. There's this sense of that. And then with students, when working with students, they would say, you know what I mean about such. It would be that, you know what I mean type thing. Like, I don't have to explain to you what I'm talking about, because you get where I'm coming from. Granted, this is definitely with African Americans. That's definitely, I'm not saying it's like if I'm with all populations that I might be working with, but the majority of the populations I was working with were African Americans, of students or even patients, just for the region that I live in. So that I thought, and that's when I knew over and over again, I'm like, they're saying this over and over again. So they're so infrequently seeing someone of color who gives them any sort of care, or on the side of an educator who's teaching them, that they are having to explain themselves so much, or maybe even defend what they do, so much because they are talking to a white practitioner or educator. And with me, they're able to say, oh, I don't have to do all this explanation with you. So.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I haven't done. I've been in minority communities for a while. I don't think I've done any one-on-one counseling with any white patients in a very long time. But even with like the youth that we interact with, because I have a small team of dietitians, when there's one of our dietitians that's Spanish speaking, and so the students are so used to like being forced to speak English in school, and when we transition to speaking Spanish, or when typically she's transitions to like identifying terms or identifying the My Plate food groups in Spanish, like seeing their faces light up and feel comfortable and starting to just like have this dialogue and talk about foods, and just like the lesson clicks so much more with our students when, you know, it's taught by her versus, you know, if it wasn't taught by somebody who could do that or could had that same experiences as they might have. So I think I see it there the most for sure.
That's really, really true. I love that. And again, it results in the very best care for the people that we're trying to help, which I think is so, like, it's just nice to boil it down to something simple like that. Like that's why we're here. We all care about that. I'm curious, and I'm always sensitive. I don't want to make this about white people at all, and that's because that's not what it's about. But I'm always just curious, like, for anyone who's listening, who's like, okay, well, how could I be a bit more sensitive? How could I do better connecting with my clients and patients of color? Is there any element of Diversified Dietetics to help train or help white clinicians do better with their cultural sensitivity or things along those lines, or is that not part of the mission?
So we actually just had a call earlier today, and we were talking about that. That's kind of our goal, I think, of our, especially the educator workshop series that we are planning to do, because they were the ones who are affecting really the pipeline of the workforce. But I will say, real time today, what people can do is really listen. And I say that because one of the first dietitians I spoke to who listened, who was a white dietitian, there were two of them, Rebecca Scritchfield and Leslie Schilling at FNCE last year. And they, first time I ever met Rebecca, I saw her speak at FNCE earlier in the day, and we were speaking later on at some event that we were at, and we were talking about diversity, and we were talking about how it wasn't as diverse in the profession. And I said, well, it's a pipeline issue. I said the same thing I'm saying here. And it was the first time, and I've told Leslie and Rebecca this several times since then, that white women just stopped and listened to me. They did not say yes, but no, but yeah, I hear you. But they didn't do that. They just stopped and they listened for quite a while, as I probably just went on and was just frustrated. But it really, really meant something to me that they stopped and they just listened, and they didn't try to explain it away or anything. So I would tell people, even if you're working with your client, and I would do that too if I'm working with somebody who's not the same background as me, be they my same race, because we're not all homogenous, even within African American community. Yeah, that you just stop and you listen to people, and if they're telling you I'm eating this way or I'm doing this, we're used to asking people things about layers related to like their emotions, and maybe they dealt with something as a child, maybe it was an abuse or something, but there's also a lot of history and heritage that people have in their culture. And the reason why they do it is because it's rooted in their culture. And when you're asking people to change something, you're taking away their history. Mm-hmm. That's so important to them. To just stop and listen to them. I say, we do plan to have this workshop series and resources. You definitely can follow us on, I think also what's powerful too is if you follow us on social media, is reading the comments that people of color are saying, because we're not saying it, they're saying it. And you can see, and they're saying sometimes what people have said to them that have been hurtful or discouraging. And just see what they're saying. And that's another way of listening to them, so that you can just be more aware and adjust from there. We're not in a push, I think, we're not trying to reverse the whole demographic of the profession. And now, since there's no white people in it, that's not what our goal is. That's not what's going on.
Even if that
here.
was your goal, it probably wouldn't happen.
It would be very difficult to do. Trust me. That would be hard. That's not what we're trying to do. But in the meantime, I told Rebecca this too. I said, we have to have, I don't think that, I told her, I was telling her about the whole Me Too, the Me Too movement, where people had said that if we really want for women to have rights, and men have to help. And I told her, I said, if we really want to have diversity in our profession, we need white dietitians to think this is an issue too. We can't do this in our home, but we need them to start listening to us and what we're really saying.
So that's something I'm aware of and wanting to be sensitive of too. Like, I don't want this to feel like I'm like, oh, look at me, I have Tamara and Deanna on my podcast, and then that, like, let's make this all about me. That is 100% like something I'm aware of, and also something I am not trying to do. I think you're so right. I think that white people who are in positions of having platforms or leadership roles or admitting interns into their program really could benefit our entire profession, and then in turn the people we serve when we listen, when we provide space to have these discussions, when we do the work of really looking at our own issues around these things and really actively trying to work on them ourselves. I think it becomes really obvious that this is a really big deal and something that we all can have a part in playing in terms of making it better. Yeah. Go ahead, Deanna.
No, yeah, I was just going to say, I think another important thing is to kind of just look, that people can do is just look introspectively, because sometimes, we can have biases that we don't recognize or that we don't call out for ourselves. So I think, our educator survey is up, and it kind of just helps you to look internally, or even internally at your campus or your school, at what are the practices that I'm already doing, and could this, be a barrier, even if I'm not even trying to make it a barrier. Like what are those things that could be altered or changed?
Right. And on this podcast, I encourage a lot of introspection and work around our internally held weight bias and our, any biases we have around these types of things. But I think it's so relevant to do similar work around race and skin color and backgrounds and cultures, and really just do, extend, if someone listening feels like, oh yeah, I've done some really good things at becoming better at not making assumptions about someone's body size, maybe, trying to extend some of those skills into this arena, because it benefits everybody when we don't make those assumptions, and when we listen and, look at our own biases.
I would also add in too, that if you come across any professionals who come across a student of color, really encourage them. If they ask about the field of nutrition, just take a little extra step. And this is all students, I believe, of white students or students of color, and really help them. That we do not have an easy educational pathway at the end of the day. It has many different layers to it. There's different steps to it. There's different processes to it. And so if you have a student who comes across and they meet you and you do a career day or something at your child's school or something, that you just take the little extra step, if you can, at least connect them with somebody. I know we're all very busy, but connect them so that they can be successful. Don't just say, oh yeah, this is great, you can go out to eatright.org and figure it out. Just say, hey, yeah, maybe we could have a 10-minute chat, and I can kind of explain this to you, and then really connect them. You definitely can always send them our way now. That's one of the reasons why we want to put that out there, because we knew that people are busy. We're not saying people aren't busy, so they may not have the time to do it. So we want to have that platform, but at least take that little extra step, because sometimes it's just they just need somebody to just show up, point them in the direction to go, or they might have a question or something like that. Or, I know we had April was preceptor month, offering to precept students. I can't tell you how many students have reached out to me who are doing internships, who are just trying to find a preceptor. Mm-hmm. They're just trying to, and they struggle because they can't find a preceptor. So little things like that you might have someone come across your pathway, that's definitely something you can do. Is you can, may not be a formal mentor for them, but you can serve in a mentorship way, or at least just assisting them to get some resources so that they can continue on in making their career goals.
That's a great idea. Deanna, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I echo all of that. I think what's been kind of, because I'm at an earlier point in my career, and I've kind of recently seen the benefit of a mentor. And so I think that's also why it's important for us to have that leg of Diversified Dietetics. But the mentors in my life were kind of the people that shifted the way I thought about my projected career path, like in a big way. And so I just think having that person in your life, even if it's someone that you talk with on a monthly basis or bi-monthly basis, just having that different perspective from someone that's been there before, I think is very useful. And I wish I had one in undergrad or in my dietetic internship that I could have leaned on. So I'm glad that the resources are going to be there for that to happen.
Yeah, that's such a big deal. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to add too. I mentioned this to people before that I didn't have any, just because of the sheer numbers of people of color who are in our profession. My mentors have all been white women. I mean, it's not that people haven't, helped me along the way. But they really listened to me, and they really were very sensitive to whatever unique challenges I may have had. But I have some people who, the reason why I have the job I have today was someone I met from undergrad 15 years ago, who has kept up with me over the years. And so it is possible for you, and we do not have the same background. I can guarantee you these people grew up in a very different way than I did. But what really warms my heart to my mentors is that they were okay with that. They're like, she doesn't look like me, doesn't have the same background. She's not going to believe everything I say. We may not have the same religion or even, anything like that, but they still were willing to mentor me. And so that is something that people can keep in mind too. The person doesn't have to look like you for you to mentor them. That is possible to have that relationship with a student, or like Deanna was saying, young professional. I think one of the things we've seen, I was kind of surprised to see from feedback of young professionals, is that several of them have said they haven't had any mentors. There's dietitians all around. And so there's something going on there too, that maybe there's an idea that a mentee should look like me or think like me, or, have a very similar background. And that's not true. You can really have a successful mentorship. I'm so thankful for the people who have, kind of taken me under their wing over the last, 10, 15 years, from me being a student into a professional.
Yeah, that is invaluable to just have. I mean, and just like in the therapeutic relationship, it's a huge percentage of what predicts positive outcomes in therapy is the connection that the client has with the therapist. Like, that connection is so critical. I think that that's what you're speaking to here, is you can connect across races and across cultures or across religions or whatever might be a potential barrier. You can connect. It's sometimes easier when you have some of these things in common. But if you can help build that trust with the person you're mentoring or the person who's mentoring you, I think that can also be something that all of us can think about how we can do that better. Well, this is such an incredible program you both are doing, and I love the idea that both of you had this idea separately and then came together. We're connected by, it's Wendy, and who's the other one of Food Heaven Made Easy?
Jess.
Wendy and Jess. Okay. And came together to create this amazing platform for, let's just kind of summarize. So there's mentorship for young professionals and students. There's regular blog posts that talk about these things, but also spotlight some dietitians in the field. Is that right?
Correct.
And then there's also some initiatives to have conversations with people in leadership roles, people on admissions for internships, to try to kind of figure out what the barriers are, do a little bit of education around some of these issues, and just kind of increase awareness around the importance of diversity in dietetics. Anything else I missed?
I don't think so. I think that's kind of the three major arms of it.
And I know it's new, so I'm sure it'll evolve in months and years to come. But this is when I heard about this project, I was so excited because this is just such an important thing. I have clients come in my door who I know, like, my physical presence makes them a little bit uncomfortable. Like, I can feel that from them, and it's hard because I can't change the way that I look. But at the same time, I just wish that there were some options for people to seek care and services from people who they're able to connect with. And I think that this is such an important thing. Again, coming back to this idea of, like, how do we help people? How do we really effectively do our jobs? I think this is such an important part of that. So I'm really grateful for what you're doing, and I'm excited to see how things evolve and grow through the years.
Thank you. Yeah, we're definitely excited to see where things go as well. We have our advisory council, and we're interested to hear their points of view as well. So, yeah, thank you for highlighting our platform, and hopefully people can visit our website, can also visit all of our social media pages, and learn more about it and get involved.
That's awesome. So will each of you just take a little minute to kind of summarize what you're excited about with the project, and also maybe just some ideas just in general, like what do you wish people knew about nutrition and health, and what, like if you could give people advice, what would it be, just kind of in general?
So I would say I want people to know that nutrition is not complicated. Dietitians are here definitely to kind of guide you if you need some help. But I always tell clients that I work with that you really do know how to eat. You learned it as a baby. It's within you. And if you are someone who is from wherever you are from around the world, that even from where you're from there's a healthy way to eat that way too. And so there is a way to include there's a way to include your history and what's important to you and your values that keeps you connected to your history in a healthy lifestyle.
That's good.
Totally agree. I love that.
Yeah, that's really good.
Tamara, that's awesome.
Let's see. For me, I think I'm most excited about. I'm really excited about the mentoring aspect of it. I think that. I think people can benefit for sure from having strong mentors in their life, but also not forgetting about the strong networks that they can create with the person right next to them. So to kind of think about that as you're going through your nutrition careers or your nutrition jobs, that sometimes the person that you work with or that you are on the same level as can be just as good of a mentor as someone that's in the position that you want to have 5 years from now. So just to not forget and to definitely take advantage of the relationships that you come across on a day-to-day basis.
Love it. Love it. Thank you both so much for coming on the podcast to talk about your project and what you do for your work as well. So just take a minute and tell everybody how to keep in touch with you, what the website is, how to keep in touch. Well, you already said on social media, but just say it one more time.
Sure. So you can find us most places by searching for Diversify Dietetics. That's our website, that's our Facebook, that's our Instagram, and on Twitter we are DiversifyRDN. So you can find us there.
Okay, and it's diversifydietetics.org. So
correct.
Yep.
Yes.
And you can find resources for getting involved. You can find events coming up, which I guess is getting updated, and then a blog. You can also donate. Do you want to just take a minute to talk about how people can help financially with what you're up to?
Yeah, so we are in the process of setting that up for the nonprofit, and we'll put out an announcement on all of our pages. Okay. Once we have that finalized.
The 501c3 probably has to be in place before the donations come in. Okay. So just we'll encourage people to keep checking the website and keep in touch with you so that they can know when their financial contributions might be able to be effective right away. So great. Thank you. Well, thank you, Deanna and Tamara. This was such a great conversation, and I just really appreciate you being willing to chat with me on the podcast about what you're up to. This is really important work you're doing, and I'm really grateful you're doing it.
Thank you so much.
Well, I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you haven't already, please go ahead and leave a review on iTunes. Thanks again so much for listening, and we'll see you soon for another episode.